This Carlsen pawn sacrifice on move 15 was so deep that the chess engines of the time couldn't even find it. We're rewinding here to 2014. It's the Zurich Chess Challenge. Magnus has just become the world chess champion in November 2013. 2 months later, he's playing against Boris Gelfand, who was really at the height of his powers. Magnus with white, and this game just came to my mind as one of the most stunning I've ever seen. Had to bring you it. Let's dive in on this positional classic. Magnus plays the English, the Norwegian essaying it against the Israeli in Switzerland. Now we see g6. Boris Gelfand invites a mainline King's Indian, but Magnus goes for the side knight f3, not knight c3, bishop g7, and he also builds a banana hammock. Many of moves available to black here, but Boris goes c6, the bishop tucks into bed, and he plays this neo-Grunfeld structure as it's known, played by those who think they're the one, and Magnus now goes for the weird move competition with queen a4. Now it's normally a boo-boo to bring the lady out so early, but he's threatening to take on d5. You can't take back with the pawn, so knight takes, then you can get the big centre. So castles, of course. Both players do it. Quick high five, as was the etiquette of the day. And now who can play the weirdest move? Boris puts his hand up with this one. Why would you do that? Why not develop this knight? Did he wrist slip? Who knows, right? But it sets up a threat here to go for the queen and the pawn. So Magnus now drops back. So does Boris. Such a strange maneuver. Now we see bishop f4 and the giant Jenga tower is erected on the f-file there. What a scene. Magnus attacks the pawn, defended here, and he just carries on. Always get your bits out, but Boris forgets that classic chess lesson, doesn't simply develop, which he probably should do. He instead jumps with the knight. Okay, not such a big deal, but Magnus can now carry on with his natural development. This one's a bit in jail. You've always got to be a bit careful, but not getting trapped just yet. And now we see the ladies leave the board. Couple of Magnus fans start bleating. Even in those days, he was an endgame god. And now, although this knight's on the edge of the board, it looks to jump to this weakened square. Magnus now takes, pawn recaptures, and this is move 15. One of the most beautiful pawn sacrifices he ever played. I love this one. Sticks with me to this day. What do you think he did here? So you're really only looking at two moves. If you were going to go b4, well, you really ought to hang your head in shame. That does absolutely nothing. The move is pawn g4. Why would you give away poor Gary like that? We're gonna find out. Now the pawn was gobbled up like a juicy plate of mushrooms. It's the only logical move. If you drop him back, well, it's a huge gain for white. And now this is the follow-up. Take on e4, pawn recaptures and drop back. Pressuring, about to win the pawn with interest because you're opening the bishops right now. So of course you have to play pawn f5, cemento that pawn on e4, and of course set up an overpowered connect 4. Boris only goes and wins himself tickets to the Magnus Carlsen Ostrich show. What a lucky guy. Now we see pawn f3 from Magnus, and this is the really key follow-up point. The centre's about to collapse, right? If you take here, wasn't played, well, this is the move, and simply look at the transformation of the position. Magnus is a pawn down, but look at the bishops. The knight's a bit offside for the moment. This one's actually a bit out of the game, kind of stuck, hemmed in by its own pawns. So it's a really, really beautiful compensation for the pawn. But Boris didn't take. He pushed on with pawn e5. Magnus now either has to give up one of those bishops or take with the pawn, which he did. Now Boris takes. We get a similar line to the one we were just looking at, but Boris doesn't play in the best way because it's counterintuitive. He should actually take the knight. Bishop recaptures here. And although Magnus is going to mop up probably both of these queenside pawns, Boris will get the e5 pawn, and then what do these white pawns really count for? They're doubled, they can be blockaded quite nicely, should give the best drawing chances. But we didn't see takes. Instead, this rook centralized here. Now we saw rook a5, Magnus whispering, do you even rook cliff, bro? Covering his center for a third time, and after knight b4, offering the a pawn but activating the knight, Magnus doesn't take it. He doesn't want to leave the protection of this pawn, so instead he centralizes the knight. Suddenly the bishop just firing into thin air, the whole queen side under fire here, so Boris pushes on with b6 here, encouraging Magnus to take, played, but now he's left a defensive e5. This is the point. The center is taken, also lines of attack opened here, but Magnus not so obliging. He plays bishop h6, and it's really uncomfortable now for Boris's king because this diagonal opens. This guy can't defend. If you go rook f7, you immediately run into problems because look at this for a switchback. Hitting that one, and it can't be defended. Once it moves, you land bishop d5. If you go with the bishop to defend, I never checked out this line. Let's switch on the engine because I'm too tired to try and calculate myself. h3 is good apparently. Here and here. Okay, and then knight c6. So you double pressure, and after takes, you're hitting one rook and threatening to go here and win a second rook. Not good. So let's run back. No rook f7 in the first place. We saw rook f6. Bit clumsy. Now pawn h3, the bishop backs up, and now another brilliancy from Magnus. What a stunning game this is. Can you guess what he played? So very well done if you found the move of knight to c2.
Trust me, it's an absolute banger. It's a game changer.
What a move. If you take that one, again, you've just gained access to the d5 square. That's check. If you go this way, that is not just check, it's mate. What a line. And if you instead step this way, well, you can't. Illegal move. So you'd have to start blocking, right? Then you're going to lose an exchange. Could even be better than that in the position. The rook can soon join in with the fun somewhere. So let's run back. Boris didn't take. He plays the only move to really stay in it here, and it's pawn g5. Excellent move. Hits the bishop, so we see takes, but you just gain a moment of reprieve because now you attack it and you x-ray the white king. Magnus takes on f5, defending the bishop, pressuring this one, but what if now takes the knight in this position? You know, now if you check, fine, you can step to the corner, right? And you're doing okay. Well, no. This time, there's this awesome move. Because if you leave the back rank, you can check once more and you're completely hemmed in. Crazy, beautiful lines. If you step up, by the way, still a checkmate. The bishop takes these squares. Absolutely incredible. So after rook takes on f5, we didn't see knight takes here, allowing bishop d5. Instead, h6 was played, trying to randomize things. The clock times are low at this point. You could simply take the knight on b4, but Magnus instead takes here. Now rook takes back and then takes on b4. The smoke is starting to clear. How's the material count? Well, Magnus is 2, even 3 pawns ahead. His king's also safer. We see takes here, only 2 pawns ahead, but look at the piece play, the domination. The king sidesteps, worried about some knight checks. Now rook b7, going after this pawn. So we see a counter-attack on this pawn, but before it can be gobbled up, it's pushed on. Rook g8 puts the pressure on the king, but Magnus hops, counters on the rook. It slides, bishop e4. Every single white piece now aimed in one direction. Let's kill this poor guy. Moribund in the corner. If you dare to take that pawn, then there's check. King g8, check. Another recurring theme, and the king can't even move. Completely boxed in by all the pieces, right? You'd have to give up the rook and get mated like this. So after bishop e4, no takes. we saw this desperate move trying to eliminate one of the attacking pieces, but Magnus, cool and calm as a chess cucumber, takes on b6, and you can't take the knight or you lose the rook, which is undefended with check. So king g7, very natural. But now, the finishing touch, the chef's kiss. Magnus Carlsen cooking. He plays rook f2, and he vacates the f5 square for the knight, which is preparing to check. Nasty. And also prepares rook g2 in many lines. So if you take that free piece, for example, thinking lovely jubbly, I'm all covered, well, there's this check. And look at the power of the light squared bishop, the silent killer from afar. What to do here? If you block, obviously we take. And if you move the king, then anyway the rook drops. White remains an exchange ahead, and 1, 2, 3 pawns. That's absolutely terminal, even if one drops off the board. Stunning game from Magnus, 37 moves of destruction. Hope you enjoyed this old classic, and if you want to see another epic game of chess from Magnus Carlsen himself, have a look at the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching, and see you soon. Cheers.